In the early 1990s, something unusual happened inside the research laboratories of a major shampoo company. There was no press conference, no public announcement, no dramatic marketing campaign, yet the decision made inside that meeting room would quietly change the ingredients used in shampoos around the world. And most consumers never noticed. At the time, the global hair care industry was booming. Shampoo had already become a daily habit for millions of people. Supermarkets carried entire aisles filled with brightly colored bottles promising stronger hair, shinier hair, thicker hair, healthier hair. But behind the marketing promises, the science of shampoo had remained surprisingly consistent for decades. Most formulas relied on the same basic system: strong cleansing agents known as surfactants, conditioning additives designed to smooth hair, thickeners to give the product a rich texture, and preservatives to keep bacteria from growing inside the bottle. The formulas worked, hair got clean. Foam felt satisfying, consumers kept buying. But inside research labs, cosmetic chemists had started noticing a small problem. Actually, two problems. The first involved skin irritation. The most common cleansing agents used in shampoo were sulfates, especially compounds like sodium lauryl sulfate and sodium lauryl sulfate. These ingredients were incredibly effective at removing oil and dirt. They produced the thick foam many people associate with cleanliness. But they also had a downside. For some people, sulfates could be irritating, especially when shampoos were used daily. Dermatologists occasionally saw patients with dry, itchy scalps caused by overly aggressive cleansing products. The second problem was environmental. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, scientists studying wastewater systems began looking more closely at the ingredients flowing into rivers and lakes from household products. Most shampoo ingredients broke down naturally, but certain additives used to stabilize formulas raised questions about long-term environmental impact. None of these concerns had yet triggered major regulations. But forward-thinking companies were already thinking about the future, and one shampoo manufacturer decided to act early. Inside that meeting room, chemists proposed a bold idea. What if they redesigned the entire cleansing system used in their shampoo formulas? Not just swapping one ingredient, but rethinking the balance of surfactants, conditioners, and stabilizers from the ground up. The goal was ambitious: create a shampoo that cleaned hair just as effectively as traditional formulas, but with less irritation, and with ingredients that broke down more easily in the environment. At first, the idea sounded simple, but cosmetic chemistry is rarely simple. Surfactants are the heart of shampoo. They determine how well the product cleans, how much foam it produces, how it interacts with conditioners, how easily it rinses away. Change the surfactant system, and the entire formula must be rebuilt. For months, the company's chemists experimented with different combinations of milder cleansing agents. Some were derived from coconut oil, others came from plant-based sources. Many produced less foam than traditional sulfates. And that created a new challenge. Consumers associate foam with effectiveness. If a shampoo doesn't produce thick bubbles, people often assume it isn't working. So the chemists needed to design a formula that felt familiar while behaving differently. They experimented with secondary surfactants, milder ingredients that could boost foam without increasing irritation. They adjusted conditioning agents to ensure hair still felt soft after washing. They tested dozens of variations on volunteer panels. Some formulas left hair too heavy, others didn't clean thoroughly enough. It took nearly 2 years of testing before the chemists found the balance they were looking for. A new surfactant blend, milder than traditional formulas, but still capable of producing satisfying foam and effective cleansing. From a scientific perspective, the breakthrough was significant, but from a marketing perspective, the company faced a dilemma. How do you introduce a major formula change without alarming customers? After all, many people had been using the same shampoo brand for years. They trusted it, they recognized the bottle instantly. If the product suddenly behaved differently, even slightly, customers might assume something was wrong, so the company made a strategic decision. They would introduce the new formula quietly, same bottle, same fragrance, same advertising, only a small update on the ingredient list. For most shoppers standing in the shampoo aisle, nothing looked different. The bottle still promised healthy, beautiful hair. The lather still felt familiar. The scent remained exactly the same. And so the new formula began appearing on store shelves. Weeks passed, then months. Consumers kept buying the product. Most never noticed the change, but something interesting happened behind the scenes. Other companies began paying attention. Competitors regularly purchased rival products and analyzed them in laboratories. It's standard practice in the cosmetics industry. When chemists from competing brands examined the updated formula, they noticed the new surfactant system. They saw the shift toward milder ingredients. They noticed the reduced reliance on harsher detergents. And they understood immediately what had happened. One company had quietly redesigned the foundation of its shampoo formula. And the product still worked. In fact, it worked well enough that customers hadn't complained. That realization triggered a chain reaction inside the industry. Competing brands began experimenting with similar surfactant blends. They tested their own versions of milder cleansing systems. Some introduced new product lines marketed as gentle or moisturizing. Others gradually updated their main formulas over time. Within a few years, many shampoos across the market had adopted similar ingredient strategies. The shift wasn't dramatic enough for most consumers to notice. But from a chemical perspective, it was significant. The industry had quietly begun moving toward gentler formulations. And it all started with a decision made in one meeting room. But the most fascinating part of the story isn't just how the formula changed. It's why the change happened without most people realizing it. Because the shampoo industry had discovered something important about consumer behavior. People rarely read ingredient lists. They rely on brand recognition, packaging, scent, and the feeling the product creates during use. As long as those elements remain consistent, even major formula changes can pass almost completely unnoticed. But the ripple effects of that decision didn't stop with one brand. When the reformulated shampoo quietly entered the market, most consumers continued their routines exactly as before. They walked down the same store aisles, picked up the same familiar bottle, used the same amount in the shower. The foam still appeared, the scent still lingered. Their hair still felt clean. To them, nothing had changed. But inside cosmetic laboratories across the industry, something very important had shifted. Chemists at competing companies began analyzing the updated formula in detail. This is a normal practice in the cosmetics world. Companies constantly study each other's products to understand how they are made. They measure ingredient concentrations, they evaluate performance. They examine how formulas behave on different hair types. And when they examined this shampoo's new formula, they noticed the difference immediately. The surfactant system, the heart of the cleansing process, had changed. Instead of relying heavily on traditional detergents like sodium lauryl sulfate, the formula used a combination of milder surfactants. These gentler ingredients were less aggressive on the scalp. They removed dirt and oil without stripping as much of the natural protective oils produced by the skin. At the time, this approach was not completely unheard of, but it wasn't the standard either. Stronger surfactants were cheaper, easier to work with, and produced the rich foam consumers expected. The new formula showed something important. You could build a shampoo around milder surfactants and still satisfy customers. That realization triggered quiet experimentation across the industry. Other companies began exploring similar ingredient systems. Some created entirely new product lines focused on gentler cleansing. Others slowly adjusted their existing formulas to include more balanced surfactant blends. These changes didn't happen overnight. Reformulating a shampoo is a complicated process. Every ingredient interacts with the others. Changing one surfactant may require adjusting conditioners, preservatives, thickeners, and stabilizers. Even the fragrance can behave differently depending on the cleansing agents used. But over time, the direction of the industry began to shift. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, shampoos with milder surfactant blends started appearing more frequently on store shelves. Some brands promoted them as moisturizing formulas, others described them as gentle for daily use, still others emphasized their suitability for sensitive scalps. From a marketing perspective, the messaging focused on comfort and care. But behind those claims was the same chemical shift that began years earlier, a move toward balancing cleansing power with scalp health. Dermatologists had long pointed out that the scalp is a delicate biological environment. It contains hair follicles, sebaceous glands that produce natural oils, and a complex community of microorganisms. Together, these elements form what scientists now call the scalp microbiome. When that environment stays balanced, hair tends to grow normally and remain resilient. But when harsh detergents strip away too much oil, the scalp can react. It may become dry or irritated, it may produce more oil to compensate, or it may become more sensitive to other ingredients. Gentler surfactant systems help reduce those disruptions. Instead of aggressively removing every trace of oil, they allow the scalp's natural balance to remain more stable. For many people, that meant hair that stayed healthier between washes. Less dryness, less irritation, and fewer cycles of overwashing. Over time, the ripple effects of that original reformulation spread even further. Hair care brands began developing sulfate-free shampoos entirely. These formulas replaced traditional sulfates with alternative cleansing agents derived from coconut or other plant sources. Some of these ingredients produced less foam. Others required additional stabilizers to maintain texture. But the basic philosophy remained the same. Clean the hair without overwhelming the scalp's natural defenses. Today, sulfate-free shampoos are one of the fastest-growing segments in the hair care market. Many consumers choose them specifically to avoid harsh detergents. Others prefer them because they are gentler on color-treated hair. Hair dyes attach themselves to the outer layer of the hair shaft. Strong surfactants can gradually wash those pigments away. Milder shampoos help preserve color longer. And all of this traces back, at least in part, to that quiet decision made years earlier in a research laboratory. A decision that changed the way shampoo formulas were built. Yet the most fascinating part of the story remains how invisible the change was to most people. Consumers didn't notice because the experience of using the product stayed familiar. The bottle looked the same. The fragrance stayed the same. The lather still appeared. And in everyday life, those sensory cues matter far more to people than ingredient lists. In fact, studies of consumer behavior repeatedly show that most shoppers spend only a few seconds choosing personal care products. They rely on brand recognition, visual packaging, past experience. Very few pause to read the small text listing chemical ingredients, and companies understand this. That's why cosmetic reformulations are often introduced gradually. Small changes spread across production batches. Ingredients adjusted quietly, labels updated with minimal fanfare. As long as the product continues performing well enough, the transition usually passes unnoticed. But occasionally, those quiet changes shape the entire industry. The shift toward gentler surfactant systems is one of those moments. It didn't make headlines, it didn't involve dramatic new technology, but it gradually changed what goes into millions of shampoo bottles every year. And most people never realized it happened, which raises an interesting thought the next time you reach for a bottle of shampoo in the shower. The formula inside that bottle may be the result of decades of scientific refinement. Small adjustments made by chemists working behind the scenes. Decisions about ingredients, skin compatibility, environmental impact, and consumer experience. all layered together into a product that feels simple, just shampoo. But sometimes the most interesting changes in everyday products happen so quietly that almost nobody notices them at all.